I'll start by saying that the session hasn't started yet, and the reason for that is I need to explain to you briefly the format of this session, because it's not something I think has been tried before. It's an attempt to make this feel not like a panel discussion, and it is a live profile insofar as I will interview Charles about his life, but I will occasionally stop the interview to let you know from a kind of journalistic perspective what it is I'm trying to get Charles to say, to make kind of naked the act of journalism and let you in a little more in the interview process in the course of also having Charles let us in on his life a little bit.
Then I will know what you're getting at.
This is...
So I roll...
You roll your beanie down like that.
My beanie down.
And for those asides, just so you know when they come, I have a little, like a bell, like that, which Charles will know then to stop listening. I bought the bell in Byron yesterday, and I have to say, coming into the possession of a secretary's bell in Byron, more difficult than I had expected. I went to many shops, and almost to mock the fruitlessness of my quest, there was a gang of Hare Krishnas following me with finger chimes, with more bells than they needed. Just
you should have got them here instead of that. That would have been colourful.
It would be constant interruption in that case. So that is the formalities out of the way. We'll consider this the beginning of the session. Charles, it's good to see you.
Good to be here, but not too many tricky questions because I'm prone to dishonesty. I feel like I'm giving evidence at the Royal Commission into child abuse, sitting here like this.
Do you always feel like that?
Whenever I'm in a microphone with a stern interviewer, yes, I do. I'm a Catholic. I'm always guilty. This is an aside, but it's also a confession. I know Charles a little bit, but not terribly well, and so this conversation will be finding out things about him that I've read in his memoirs and seen in the characters based on him on television. But it will also be an attempt to get to know those aspects of Charles that he hasn't necessarily shared with you, which for a man who's written 2 memoirs and a show based on himself, there's, you know, it's optimistic to think that there might be something there. And I think at that point I should also say what this profile really is, and what I think all profiles are in journalism, is an attempt to parse persona, to try and understand whether or not what a person reflects out to the world is their true self. So that's... You never told me that.
Charles shouldn't be able to hear this bit. This bit is an aside. The first question I'm going to ask Charles is kind of a non sequitur. I'm going to ask him a question that involves an anecdote I've heard about him, and the intention there is to make Charles feel like I know a little bit more about him and that I must know mutual friends and I must have spoken to other people for this piece. But it's also to make Charles feel comfortable, because he will take this question to be such a kind of open and silly question as to then deem the rest of our interview equally frivolous, and will give him a kind of false sense of confidence. So,
hang on, I want to take a note.
So Charles, there is a story that I have heard about you that I've been told many times, and I fundamentally don't understand it. It's one of those jokes with a punchline that I laugh at but am uncertain of, and it's a story about you house sitting for Patrick White.
Yes.
And the story simply goes that you house sat for Patrick White, and that when he came back all the saucepans were bent.
Yes, well, we did have Uri Geller around while he was away, and that really bent all the cutlery into place. But it's true that I did house sit for Patrick White, not that he knew for 1 minute that I was there.
That's not house sitting, Charles, that's house breaking. He squatted for Patrick White.
He left 2 Frensham girls in charge of his house while he and Manoli went away for 6 months. And I had unfortunately squandered my Commonwealth Scholarship Certificate money. I got $2,000 for the year as a Commonwealth Scholarship, and they said to me that year, do you want it in one cheque or do you want it, you know, every fortnight? What a silly question, a bit like yours. But and
I said, no, I'll take that $2,000 in one hit, thank you. And I lost it that night at a thing called the 33 Club. And I found myself sleeping under the stairs at the Centennial Guest House, which houses carnies for the Royal Easter Show all year. And I was one of the carnies under the stairs.
The circus doesn't move on.
The circus never moves on, and except it did, because the two girls came and rescued me and let me stay for 3 weeks in Patrick's place, which I had never read a book by that stage. And I was 21, it was a year of all our 21st, and I still really hadn't read a book. I'd coloured one in, but I had never really read a book, and I went from underneath the stairs of the guest house to Patrick White's place, where I slept in his bed and I wore his beanie and I bent his cutlery and I did a lot of things, and I counted all the copies of his own books in every language that he had at his desk. And I wore his pajamas, and my life changed because I met writers and artists and
Frenchman girls.
Two Frenchman girls, and I lusted after them so much.
In another man's pajamas.
In a gay man's pajamas. Which, because when he did come back, he complained about the pubic hair in his bed and the smell of cat's piss. But what was really chilling was, I've got the letters from my own memoirs, was that neighbours, beautiful people that they were giving him reports of life in his house at 20 whatever it was street in Centennial Park, and every 2 weeks he'd get a letter from a terrified neighbour saying, oh, there are drug users in your house and there's motorbikes, and you know, we were all wearing cheesecloth tops and their hair was long, and you know, the women were wearing red lipstick, and I'd never met a Frenchman girl, and I'd never, you know, I dreamt of, you know, having my body touched by girls with actual, you know, nail polish. I'd never seen that. And so it was all my dreams come true, and Patrick was getting really, really nervous as he was getting closer and closer to coming home, because well-meaning neighbours had alerted him to the terrors of what was happening there. If only he knew the truth, we were having orgies, and, you know, we were just walking naked around the house, and I had Patrick White Club, which every Friday night I'd bring a bunch of hoons back to Patrick's place and lie on, you know, on his furniture and underneath all his. He then had Sid Nolans before he'd fallen out with Sid Nolan. He had Sid Nolans everywhere and Ben Whiteley's, and you know, it was a life that changed my life, because for the first time I met writers and artists and people from the eastern suburbs, frankly, and I'd never met a Jew. I grew up in Albury and I went to Waverley College, a Catholic school. I'd never met a Jew in my life. Suddenly in the eastern suburbs, I met Jews, and I went, these are my people. These are my people, because I read Portnoy's Complaint, which was sort of a manual of my life. And I took to New York writers, New York Jewish writers, eastern suburbs, Jewish people, and I was convinced that I was left on the front of Waterstreet's hotel in Albury as a baby. I was really a Romanov or something like that. And I really had the whale of a time. And then Patrick came back, we tried to clean the place up. But unfortunately we drank all his wine and bent everything in it. And
the question was about the saucepans. What happened to the saucepans?
Uri Geller. No, we used to boil up things that you had to boil up.
And pasta wasn't frequently on the menu?
It wasn't pasta, no. It was stuff, you know, to get high and maintain things. And I cut down, it had about an 8-foot sunflower that he had nurtured for 15 years, and it had grown to 8 feet, and I was like Mellors, the gardener. Notice how I've become well read. Mellors was the gardener in one of D.H. Lawrence's books. And I did my gardening. I cut down the sunflower till it was a stump like that, and he came back and he was heartbroken, and he wanted to sue the Frenchman girls, and David Marr had to avoid defamation lawyers because the girls were defamed by Patrick. But as it happened after he died, I got hold of all these letters about the dread that he felt coming back and how he was getting it from neighbours, and it was a gift, and his estate, literary estate, gave them to me. So I put them into my next autobiography, which is taking a little longer than I anticipated. I've done one from 11, 16, and the next one was supposed to be 21, but here I am at 43, and I still haven't finished it, but I find the longer I live, the more I have to say. A bit like this question.
That was my soft opener. And there are, in journalism, encounters you have with people where you realise you don't need to do a lot of work. The problem with a person like Charles is transcription. Sometimes you come out of an interview like this and you realise that you have thousands and thousands of words and room only for 1,500 of them.
A bit like my jury addresses.
In interviews like this, you usually really are after the answers to one or two questions, and you talk to people for a long time, hoping that somewhere in there you can slide those questions that will become the fulcrum of your piece. You've usually made an assumption beforehand about who the person is and what might have caused them to be the way they are, and you're always looking for opportunity to have them confirm what you already think of them. And so, as Charles's beanie rolls over his ears, in this interview, I really want to ask Charles two questions. I want to ask him about vanity, and I want to ask him about his mother. But I intend to find some opportunity to slip those into his otherwise long answers about other things.
What did he say?
I have read the memoirs, Charles. Can you tell me more about the little boy in the pub in Albury?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. A good cliche. My late auntie Josie used to tell me. She said, always use a good cliche because it hits a nail on the head. and
Your only guide in writing.
She was my guide to life. But talk about vanity. I've written.
We haven't.
Did you ask
we
me
have,
about
we
that?
haven't. No.
We haven't asked that. Well, the little boy in Albury was the watcher from the cast iron balcony very much. I grew up in a hotel, and I wrote the book Precious Bodily Fluids, which is a bestseller. I bought 5 copies and they're already half sold. It's only 10 years old, and the photocopies seem to have come out rather well. But Hachette have fallen on hard times, and I understand that Bottom's fallen out of publishing, so I'm looking at self-publishing my next book. But I was 11 years old in the book, and I was at the cusp of realising I was a really heavy wanker. And I had been wanking now for over 50 years, looking back. But what I tried to capture was, at 11, was 2 years of wanking. I was such a wanker that I wanked and nothing came, and then suddenly, at about 10, liquid came, and it went onto the tartan cushion. And I thought I was bleeding, that I was doing it too much. And that's basically what the book's about, Precious Bodily Fluids. I was very influenced by that book of Patrick's Portnoy's Complaint, which I said was a manual, and it was a manual, and I've never eaten liver again. I took to that book like a duck to water, and I tried to recreate some of the more erotic scenes where I think at some stage in the book I was masturbating to my sister's doll, which is a weird sort of Roger Waters, is that his name? What's his?
John
Waters.
Waters.
I get them mixed up, you know.
They're good singers both.
Yeah, but someone said I should do a road trip with John Waters. No, what? He's a gay sort of, you know, filmmaker of pornography. Oh, I see what you mean. And
He owns Patrick White's wastepaper basket.
He does.
One of the few things you didn't damage.
I bought Patrick White's table to inspire me, and I stole from Patrick, unknown to him, his layout for the vivisector, which he did like a school project. It was on his table, and it was like a school project. It had
Nobel Prize winning school project.
That pink cardboard paper that you buy from the stationery shop then, when newsagents before Lotto, and it had God up the top, and it had all the streams of characters and things. And I thought this might be worth a bit in a few years, so I rolled it up and put it in storage, where it remains somewhere in Miller's storage, somewhere in the eastern suburbs. I don't know, I've lost it. And I haven't got it to sell to John Waters.
It's a tragedy.
It is a tragedy, but the little boy in the pub grew up to go to the bar. As someone who grows up in a pub is eventually going to go to the bar. And we had 100 years of tradition in the liquor business, and I feel in the liquor business a bit like the greyhound industry, you know, lockdown, shut down. You know, what is it about governments that are trying to get rid of the Australian characteristics? Everyone should own a greyhound. It's a sort of battler's right to win Lotto, you know.
It's alright if everyone owns a greyhound. It's not okay if they kill 58,000 extra greyhounds a year to own those ones.
Well, it's either that or sell them for meat. That's what they were doing. They were shipping them over to Asia to sell them for meat. And I think of the choices, then the burial, you know, the mass burial was the lesser of two evils.
What took you to the law?
Lack of imagination, frankly. Because I'm not going to do law when I grow up. That's perfectly clear. And I hated law. The serious answer is I got a Commonwealth Scholarship at 15, despite the fact I was at Waverley College, and I was too young to do medicine. So I repeated the leaving.
You would have been a very lascivious doctor.
I would have been the king of gynecology. I've done so much field work that I should get paid for the amount of, you know, work that I've done free of charge in the field. And I'm really seriously writing a book based on vagina. I don't know whether any of you must have all read it. Vagina by Naomi Wolf. I give it out to everyone only so that the Potts Point bookshop can leave a message at my chambers saying, your vagina has arrived. And it seriously is a fantastic book, because women's sexuality is the best kept secret in the world, I've discovered, when I sobered up. You know, when I was rake, I was always too drunk, but the amazing thing is, when you sober up and you watch a lot of lesbian porn, you learn so much. And I've read Vagina, and now I'm practicing studying, and I'm doing a book.
The question was about what took you to the law.
I thought it was what was on my mind.
We'll be in this ravine for some time, I fear, if that's the case.
I hope my questions and answers are better in court tomorrow.
You examining on a Sunday?
Yeah, no, I went to the law really because my family were in pubs for 100 years, and my father was an SP bookie, and he opened on Sundays late at night, and he was a compulsive gambler, and so I thought, with my father's business, I will just do crime, and, you know,
get on the other side of it.
But he sold the pub before poker machines, fool, and then I ended up doing law. I'm still not going to do it when I grow up, and I hated lawyers, I hated law school. It was a shocking thing, And then I became a lecturer of law, where...
Did you say lecturer?
They called me King Lear. I thought because I was like Shakespearean, but it was the way I looked at girl students. But I had a rule that I was not going to, and there were no rules then, sleep with my students as a lecturer, my female students. And the men I would have equal time these days. And I know what you're going to say about me because I've read your book on Adam. And I then started to teach graduates, and they were older than me. And so by then I took them to it again, and they were the marvelous years. And then I had to go and practice law in the real world. I defended gays and Vietnam protesters and all that sort of thing as a lecturer. And I rather enjoyed going down to petty sessions and seeing what's what, and I sort of did a little bit of the bar. And then a family called the Bartons came back from South America with $100 million in legal fees. And they wanted a young lawyer who knew a bit about commercial law. I knew fuck all about commercial law, but the QC wanted a young man, and I was going out with his secretary, so I got on the inside, and he said, "Do you know anything about commercial law?" And I said, "I don't know the geography, but I do know the geology." And he went, "Oh, yeah, you're the man." And so I got the job for the Bartons, who were the Christopher Scases of their time, and that was 4 years in petty sessions court. And then the Greeks got busted, 200 got busted for Social Security, and that was another case that took 4 years. So I love long cases, and it seemed like fun. And then I had to do real law, which I tried to run away from, because it was so tiresome, I thought, and so boring, and I didn't really like lawyers much, and I didn't like sitting at a desk. But then, and I wanted to go to showbiz and do things like that. And the irony was that after many years, I found out that actually I was in showbiz. I was wearing a wig and gown during the day. I had a captive audience of 12 who couldn't leave. And I was writing my own lines, and I was acting as if my client was innocent. And so I thought, hang on, I'm doing exactly what I'm running away to. And so and I'm writing my own scripts, like jury addresses, and a laughing jury does not convict. So I try to, like you, ask tricky questions.
You weren't driven by something like a belief in justice?
Oh yes. Accidental hero. I'm an accidental hero. In a way, I'm hopeless with money, hard to believe. I was ahead of my time because people write, live in the moment, live in the present, and I certainly lived in the present. I only had the money that I had in my pocket. And so the power of now was my financial system at all times. The power of now, that's what I've got now. I don't need anything, but the future will take care of itself. So I practiced law just because I could, and I liked more, like rape. The thing that we put into rape was I took the hardest cases, the most difficult cases, cases where no one else thought they could win. People thought, oh, what a hero, he's taking on those battlers. No, the real reason is there's no psychological effort. If you lose, everyone says, oh, well, you're going to lose. If you win, oh, what a hero. But then I ended up, I think from the hotel industry, I've got a terrible sense of empathy, which means I empathize with everybody. So I say yes to everything, and hoping that girls would say yes to everything I propose. But I say yes to all sorts of...
It's not how karma works, I believe.
No, I thought it was tit for tat, but it's not. And so I take on all these cases that are, in the end, non-payers. And I end up doing a case for 6 months and they got no money, and I realised that I'm broke, and yet I live a high style. But I've only got what I've got in my pocket.
The question, though, was about a sense of justice.
I misheard. I really did mishear. No, I do. I do have a sense of justice that only persons who lived through the 60s, 70s would still cling to. You know, that there's such a thing as a fair go, and that everyone deserves their chance in court, and everyone should have a spokesman. All those things, yes, but only because there's, you know, there's. I don't do it because it's right. I do it because some, you know, bastard stream of Catholicism and guilt and 60s hippy-dippy stuff makes me do these things. I don't want to do it. I want to get paid. I want to act for BHP. I want to, you know, I want to do, you know, real.
You want to explore the geology.
Yeah, I want to get that geology I know so well. I got rocks in my head doing what I do. But no, I've come to enjoy cases, but I now really want to write about them. And although luckily enough I had Rake for a while, so I could put the stories that no one believes into Rake, and that was great fun. And but now I really want to write, but I find myself sort of still chasing the impossible cases to write about them, because every case is a story, and they're incredible stories of real life matters, like Nigel Milsom, who I talked with earlier today, who painted this dreadful painting on me. I didn't tell him at the time. My God, have you ever seen? You know, it bears nervous. I don't know what's got into his head, but prison did him no good.
Are you vain in that respect?
I'm not vain. I'm not vain at all. I've written 2 books about myself, and I've often been accused of being a narcissist, but I'm writing my next book denying it. My next autobiography is about denying narcissism, denying that it's all about me. And the mistake I made in my first 2 books, my first book I included my family. What a mistake. And because they all claimed, you know, oh, you know, it wasn't really true about me doing this, and I'm cutting them out. They're out of this book. The second book, I was 16, I wrote about my schoolmates. Nah! They all complained. No, this one is about me and my feelings, my attitude, my worldview, only me. It's got one character, me, and it's got one theme, denying narcissism. And it's just going to be the truth as I see it. And it's going to be the true me, and it's going to be 500 pages. Absolutely devoted to the fact that I am not a narcissist. I am not an egoist, and I have good reason not to be. And you will see it all played out in each page of this denial of narcissism.
Were you a show-off as a child?
Was I what?
A show-off as a child?
No, I was quite a shy boy, as bedwetters usually are. And it's funny that I was always a big admirer of comedians, and you often find in actors, and I took to actors like, you know, ducks to water, especially female actors, although that cost me a fortune. You never date an actress. You'll get sued, I mean, for palimony. But that's another story. I'm glad you didn't ask that.
Frankly, for a format like this, it would feel invasive.
Speaking of vanity, you should ask her. I knew I was going out with an actress. You know you're going out with an actress when you go into their home and there's photos and paintings of themselves. You go to any actor's home and it's just photos of themselves, whereas you go into my home And I have commissioned young women who I meet along the way to paint vaginas. And my walls are full of vaginas painted by young budding artists from the National Art School, and it looks really pretty. And
there's a large portrait of you by Adam Cullen.
I've got that there too for balance. Right. But as you know, he was repulsed by the look of that vagina, so now he'd be turning in his grave knowing that his portrait of me is surrounded by vaginas. And
when did you start showing off?
When I had good reason. Once I found the mirror in my parents' bedroom, and it was one of those vanity mirrors, which were in those days where they had the mirror there and you had the side panels. And when Mum and Dad weren't there, I found great glee in getting undressed and looking at myself in various angles on the bed. And the bed was a kangaroo pelt cover. And it started to mould a little with my frequent posing in front of the vanity mirror. And I don't know what got into me, but I kept moving the mirror from side to side just to look at various aspects. I suspect deeply I was looking for some skin cancers, which now I spend most of my time looking for skin cancers, which is the great bad side of living alone. Because I live alone and I've got no one to check my back. So I pay women to come in to check my back and the underside of my legs for any potential skin cancers, and I check them for potential lumps and things, and it's a sort of a mutual beneficial society.
You write in your first memoir about your mother's long periods of sleeping in and not leaving the room. But it sounds like you were also frequently in your mother's room.
Yes, a strange. Well, she was in hospital when I wasn't there, and as you have tweaked strangely to the fact that my mother was a dreadful alcoholic, and frequently in mental hospitals. In fact, she was in every mental hospital in the eastern states, and I think the first reading I ever did was the AA theme, the 12 steps of AA at the Strathfield hospital when we were growing up. And my mother, unfortunately, was a prisoner behind bars. She was literally one of the most alcoholic women you could have, and I spent my childhood going to the chemist to get her Vegenin and Bex and the strangely named Relaxer tabs. And she never met a pill she didn't like. Unfortunately, I inherited that. And so when I gave up alcohol, I sort of embraced pills. And so I live on pharmaceuticals now. Now they are blue, as has been pointed out. But but they don't kill you, I find.
That is one of the benefits.
One of the benefits, and I take a lot of them now, those blue pills. But I used to go for my mother to get pills, and she was very embarrassed about getting so many pills. She said, go and get me some Vegemin from the pharmacist, but also get some Modess, which are tampons of their day. So every day I was buying Modess. It was like my mother was the sort of the great Hume Weir of bleeding. And the chemist must have got a bit suspicious that this 7 or 8 year old boy was buying so much Modess. I bought Modess and pills for my mother. But that was the silent secret in my first book that I released a bit more in the second book. No one has an unhappy childhood while you're going through it. It's only when you look back on it and you go, oh my God, that was an unhappy childhood. When you were happy as Larry through it, no one cared when Mum was in hospital or that sort of thing. But in reflection, she was a sufferer of depression. But I was lucky enough in my second book to find that 6 months of nurse's notes in her last 6 months of life, before she died mysteriously of chloral hydrate poisoning, the same as Marilyn Monroe, I boast. But the nurses kept notes for 6 months of everything she said. And so I had rarely seen her sober. But in the last 6 months, I had the nurses' notes from Kenmore, ironically, the last stop for mental patients in Australia then. And so I had 6 months of great nurses' notes showing that the human being that she was, and her liveliness and her erudition and artistic side. And so I was really blessed to actually find these notes out of that hospital. So I came to terms with my alleged unhappy childhood, which of course at the time was really fantastic, because unlimited lemonade. When you're growing up in a pub, unlimited lemonade, unlimited chips, counter lunches to breakfast time. And whenever I got short of money, I would take the empty bottles from the hotel and go to the local bottle-o, where you could get money for empty bottles. And so every time my father would not give me money to go to the movies, I'd steal some bottles and sell them. And it was, I think I was devious from an early age.
I think there's a chance.
Yeah, there is a chance. I don't know how I got it, but I found illegality much more interesting than legality. My father made a living by keeping the pub open on illegal hours. And every Christmas I'd put a dozen bottles of beer into the local cop's boot. And because the law was stupid. The law meant that the railway workers, we were the railway hotel, the railway workers couldn't drink after 10 o'clock when they knocked off. So my father would keep the pub open illegally, and the cops said, that's fine if you just turn down the lights. And so they'd go past the hotel and turn a blind eye to it, like me with the muffins. And so I learned that the law was ridiculous if it tried to monitor people's behavior, like in prostitution and in drinking and even the lockdown laws. But so I grew up in an atmosphere of illegality, and so I took to crime at an early age, and I realized that Australia is a country founded, except for the black man, founded by criminals. And so I thought, the future's set. You know, I mean, it's all criminals, we're all descendants of criminals, and I'll be set for life, but not many get caught. It's not enough.
You talk a lot about women, Charles.
It's a cover.
No. That's not where this line of questioning is going. You talk a lot about women, and I wonder if, you know, are you at all a student of Freud? I mean, I'm sure you've read a lot of Portnoy's Complaint, and it's a very brief extrapolation from there.
No.
But is there any sense that you believe adults sometimes are filling adolescent holes?
Oh, I still, absolutely. I treasure my sexuality. I treasure it very deeply, and I feel that if you let the sexuality die, a little bit of you dies, a lot of you dies, and much of my vigor in life is sex-driven, and I don't mean just penis-driven. It's driven by desire and by passion, and I find that if I keep that alive, then I keep my work alive, and I keep everything alive. And although I do go on and on and on about women, it's because I love them to death. But I also hope they take pity on me as I get older. And I found that, strangely, I was always in love with older women when I was younger, but as I've got older, I've got in love with more younger women. And I probably am going to get arrested crawling around humidity cribs in maternity hospitals.
Often I think in journalism, conversations like this
are about trying to find a ball of twine essentially and roll it back on itself until you can return sufficiently often to the points you're trying to make to find interesting and new things about them. And Charles, you talk about Rake, you've talked in this conversation about Rake in the first person. You said, when I was Rake.
Yeah, well, yes, I do that, and that's mischievous of me, because although I was very much the vase in which they arranged the flowers,
You don't have any grandiose views of yourself.
They're not grandiose, they're real. As I tried to point out in my denial of narcissism. No, I don't. It's a fault of mine. I think of Rake, when I think of Rake, I think of my drinking years and my drugging years, which seemed like a lifetime at the time. And so it's just convenient for me to realize that it's 20 years since I've had a line of coke or something like that. Not that I mind a line of coke being snorted by some young woman off my body. That's an entirely different thing.
And the only effective way to check for skin cancer, I'm told.
That's vicarious pleasure, which is really a good pleasure. It's like phantom pleasure. You know, no one has dealt with phantom pleasure. They've dealt with phantom pain, but phantom pleasure is as real as phantom pain, and if not better.
Do you ever, though, struggle to avoid playing the character that is Rake? Is there a temptation?
Oh, yeah.
Not to drink and to drug again, but to...
Oh no, I do, and it's an absolutely shocking characteristic of mine, and all my friends have abused me for it, and I have carried on far too long with that winking, leering person who, you know, talks lusciously about women, and I'm going to drop it shortly. But I'm on Facebook, and people, my friends, have, you know, rapidly left me and say, stop posting things about sex. You know, you're too old, you're embarrassing. My son, you know, my son's gone onto a separate Facebook. He's got a false Facebook for me, and then he's got a separate Facebook, which is real Facebook. And so he leads this double life where he posts, you know, I'm at church, I'm doing work, I'm studying, and, you know, on this false Facebook that I'm on, and then on his real Facebook he uses his real friends. But no, I must say that the time of Rake and acting out that is way over. I've way too much invested into that, and I've got to get another.
Can you get away from it?
Oh yes, no, I've got a new character. But, I've got two new characters that I've found in my court cases. One I've sent to Chris Lilly, and it's a Byron Bay boy, and his first name was Buzz. I better not say his second name. But
yes, because Buzz doesn't identify anyone.
No,
it's such a common name.
There are 100 Buzzes in the Byron Bay area, but he was a part-time dealer, part-time chef, part-time DJ, and he got caught selling drugs to undercover policewomen. Tricky bastards, you know, using policewomen undercover in clothes, you know. And he started selling, you know, 2 and then 4 and then 10,000. But he was a cheeky guy, and what happens when you get arrested, you have what's called a record of interview, an ERISP, like this, and it's a video of you being interviewed by 2 big fat burly cops there, like you know, bookends, and Buzz is in the middle, and he's a part-time DJ, part-time chef, part-time dealer, you know, and he's made a deal with the cops that he will give up Mr. Big above him, but he won't be talking about it on the ERISP. And so you know, the cops go, you're warned, you know, anything you say, you don't, you know, have to say it, you know, and you go, yeah, but the deal still goes, doesn't it? And, you know, and he's shifty as all get out as a part-time chef, part-time GM, part-time dealer would do. And he couldn't believe his luck. You know, he found 2 women that not only bought 2 pills, escalated over weeks to buy 10,000 pills. And they were practically in police uniform, you know. I mean, it was like he was stupid. But
this is the character you're going to begin to play.
That was a character I thought Chris Lilly could play.
Right.
But another character I've come across is a guy who is obsessed with litigation. He's got 100 cases going at any one time. He's an accountant. He has unfortunately been to jail, but he's obsessed with litigation, and the working title is the lender of last resort. He's one of those people that have found you can lend to anybody who's deeply in trouble at 25% with secret little components where no one ever gets paid, and they take the house off them, and he's a real rogue, and but absolutely fascinating. He's got an office out at Liverpool where he's got fraudsters, convicted fraudsters, all working as bookkeepers, and many of them are Chinese, but they're stealing from him, but he allows it because they're keeping their eye in.
As you look to replace the kind of excessive, lascivious character that is attached himself to you, do you think maybe about drawing from outside your clients?
No,
they are uniformly criminals.
This is a pool that keeps on giving. This is an endless well. Every day you're in the front stalls, you're seeing life at its worst. There are no winners, you know, and in crime there's no good news. You know, Crime Wave is about the only good news you get. And, you know, you never get cheering up emails. You never get texts that are, you know, grateful. You never get good news like you would in business, you know, or sales are up and you're making money, and in crime it's just all bad stories.
Is that why you have to show off?
That's why you have to show off. That's why you have to live the lie. You know, after all, you are paid to tell lies for money, and somehow or other I was, you know, born into it. I think as a publican's son, I was serving behind the bar to drunks for, you know, many years of my childhood, and you learn to judge people on, you know, many levels, and everyone is equal on the other side of the bar, but you learn to, you get an intuition about what's going on really just by observing human nature at its worst, because the 8 o'clock shift at Waterstreet in the morning was very, very early lesson in heavy drinking, where they literally would have a double dark of port and wrap the towel around it to get it around to their mouths, and it was literally like that. And I think I've been drawing on that pool of experience my whole life. But the cast of characters in court is the best drama in the world, and I don't know why people don't pay to go to court.
They do, they pay you. It's usually being arrested first.
Yeah, but they should, we should have it on television. Like the OJ case, people learn more about law watching OJ's case that a good lawyer can get you off murder.
With that pitch for clients, I think that's the end of our profile and the end of the time that we have.
But what about me?
Thanks very much for participating in what might have been a strange format.